Okay, thank you. We'll go ahead and get started. I see Erica's joined us too. Great. Got the normal crew here tonight. Well, let me go to share screen and go to Okay, can y'all see the Blackboard screen?
Yes.
All right. Let's go to course content. Look at the weekly schedule. This is just a reminder of the weekly reading that goes along with the course. And let's see where we are. We're on week 10 of 15. Which would be 2nd through the 6th, supervision and duty roster. Look at the OMA. I covered all those things last week. I don't really have any additional readings for you on those or things to do. As a reminder, you can go to our Wikispaces page and get a lot of ancillary materials that go along with these lectures. That's at www.soegraduatecourses.wikispaces.com. I know you know how to get to the Wikispaces page. So there's no additional reason I want to point, there's no additional reading this week. If we go, the assignment Dropbox, let's look at that again. Continue to put your completed peer reviews in and your components as we go. I want to focus, we're in the last third of the course tonight, starting tonight. I'm going to try to cut down on, I'm not going to put any more discussion boards in. I'm not going to do anything. We're going to focus on evidence artifacts the rest of the way through. We pretty much covered everything that we need to cover in terms of facilities, the bulk, just some smaller stuff along the way. We really need to focus on our evidence artifacts and getting those in our Dropbox. To that end, as I said, I won't be doing any more discussion boards. You'll only do peer reviews. And in terms of peer reviews, just one a week from here on out. Now that I've looked at them, everybody's caught on, everybody knows what they're doing now. You've done several. Just do one peer review a week. Is all you need to do, and no discussion boards. The rest of your time should be spent on evidence artifacts. Everybody understands that, so we're good to go on that. Tonight, I want to finish up on supervision schedule and duty roster. To that end, I've got some materials. First thing I want to do is lesson plan. Role of the principal. Stop share. Can you see role of the principal on the screen now?
Yes.
Okay, good. Grade and classify pupils. Make accurate reports to the superintendent to improve instruction, community spirit. Conduct fire drills and inspect for fire hazards. The part, and I covered this last week, and I want to make sure I reiterate, the part of this that principals neglect the most is the inspect for fire hazards. And so what I recommend is that you twice a month have one of your assistant principals go with your head custodian and do an assessment inventory of your facilities for fire hazards. Now, the way you do that is use this assessment inventory from the state right here. You see that on your screen? EDS watch list school state audit preparation, assessment, inventory for safe, orderly, and caring school physical environment. That's what the state calls it. We call it inspecting for, for fire hazards, but that's what the state calls it. And here is their checklist. It's on our page for tonight. Excuse me. All right, I'm back. So it's about making sure that your bus drop off and loading zone are clearly defined, separated. You don't have hazards out in your parking lot, or you don't have cars and buses together, and that you've got people out there. Now, how that relates back to your duty roster is if you don't have people out there, it goes crazy. You know that. So the physical inventory list and keeping your school safe, your facility safe, which we're going from duty roster into and supervision schedule into facilities. That's next week, and I may even get there a little bit earlier tonight. But they're tied together. Is what I need for you to understand. That if you don't put people in the right places, then your physical environment won't be safe, no matter what you do. So if you want your bus lot and your car parking lot to stay safe in terms of not being things out there that shouldn't be, and people not being where they shouldn't be, and kids walking in car lines, and those, you have to put people out there on duty. So the point of this is you can't separate facilities and safety and duty roster. They all go together, because you can have the best plan in the world, but if you don't put people out there supervising it on duty, it's not going to happen. I was at Inlow. Is that where you are, Sean?
Yeah.
Last time I came and visited you in the spring, it was during all that snow.
Mm-hmm.
And we were it was snowing that day. You'll remember when I was there with you, you'd been out for 2 or 3 days, but it was snowing that day. And the students were wanting up. And I was out at the bus lot where I had parked, and students were running between the buses and out in the cars, and there just wasn't anybody out there on supervision. Now, I shouldn't say that on the air, I guess, because my point is it was a special day and things were a little bit hectic. But on a normal day, that should never happen. You need people out there supervising to make sure it doesn't happen. And so even though you may have a schedule in place that works on normal days, you need to understand on extraordinary days when things kind of go haywire, like a snowstorm starts, you may have to have extra people out there. That's when you get on the intercom and say, hey, everybody report, all staff report to the bus lot. Because those days, everybody thinks the rules go out the window. But the point to remember here is there is a relationship between school safety, facility safety and management, and the duty roster. The duty roster, to start from the beginning on that, is where teachers are during the day, during the regular day, on supervision of bus lot, car lot, halls, cafeterias, bathrooms, those kinds of things. You can't leave those things to chance that somebody will be there. You have to plan for people to be there, and you have to supervise that they're going to be there. And that's what this assessment inventory does. It speaks to those things, that people are there and they're being clearly defined, separated, they're being supervised. It speaks to your doors being locked during the day and not propped open, not chained open. It speaks to how you handle chemicals, all your cleaning materials and supplies, storage in auditoriums and band rooms and things of that nature, which is always really, really bad. That's almost a constant in every, especially high school, that the stage is piled with stuff. And if there happens to be, I was at a school in Anderson, South Carolina last week. I won't say which one. And I was they had what I guess you call it a gymatorium that has a stage there off of the gym, and the teacher that I was there visiting, his office was on the back of the stage up there, and we had to run the gauntlet to get into there. And I thought, if somebody pulls the fire alarm, I'll never get out. And then, because they brought kids in and they were up on the stage on the risers and we couldn't get out, and it was just a mess. But you say, well, that's an extraneous situation, Dale. But, you never know when an emergency is going to occur. The fire marshal would have closed the place down if he'd have shown up and saw that. They had an activity going on and they had brought a lot of stuff in, but even then you got to be safe. Classroom doors equipped with heavy duty locks. Make sure, teachers' doors, all the locks on their doors are working in case you have a lockdown or an emergency. I've spoken to you before about, we went through the crisis box and the crisis plan, the red and green cards that go on the back of the door that, in lockdown situations, all of those kinds of things. This is a hazardous materials, how they're treated, where they're stored. I had a high school in Charlotte that we got in trouble over. The custodians had gotten lazy, and they had taken some of those old classroom dividers like you see in classrooms and sectioned them off a little area in the cafeteria and put all their chemicals in there in the cafeteria where people eat. And didn't have any kind of a lock or security. They were just sitting there in the floor, just had one of those classroom dividers in front of them where, thinking that kids wouldn't see them. That kind of stuff is just unacceptable. Hazardous chemicals that are used, safety posters, bomb threats, all that stuff is on this inventory. Every 2 weeks, you should have an assistant principal and your head custodian. The assistant principal is there to make sure that everybody's on their duty station, that duty roster. And the custodian is there to make sure that all of these safety things are being followed. That should be done every 2 weeks. Now, supervision schedule is just an extension of the duty roster. It's the same thing. It's just for after hours activity. We do designate them being different because at different levels you have different levels of involvement with staff after school. Obviously not as much in elementary and a lot more in high school, but a supervision schedule is how you're going to supervise activities after school. Again, one administrator should be at every after school activity. Normally in larger staffs you divide it up. Smaller staffs, the principal just has to go. But somebody should be there and be in charge and be on supervision. And if it's a large activity like a high school football game, you should have, the district will usually hire security and police to be there, security to do the wanding and crowd control, and then they'll do the police for their job. But you'll need staff there also. You can't just put a sign-up sheet like we used to in the teacher lounge and tell teachers they had to sign up for 2 events. Now you have to assign those because you do not want to go to court and try to defend yourself against inadequate supervision. Well, I told them to sign up, and they just didn't sign up. Nobody showed up, and something happened. Now, as I've told you before, I am not telling you that if you have more people there that things won't happen. What I'm telling you is when you go to court, you can defend yourself against inadequate supervision, because that's when you get sued civilly. That's what they sue you on. Kid gets hurt in a fight in the cafeteria. He didn't start it, and he wasn't involved, but they knocked the table over and it broke his leg. His parents sue you for inadequate supervision. You had two faculty members in there for 300 kids. You're going to get fried in court because the number is 1 to 45. Let me say that again. The number is 1 to 45. You must have one adult for every 45 kids. If it's an after-school activity, it's basically the same number. You only have 2 people with 300 kids and somebody gets hurt. I'm not telling you if you had 6 people there or 7 that fight wouldn't have occurred, but you'll be able to go to court and demonstrate that you had adequate supervision when you get sued civilly for a child getting hurt. We don't want kids to get hurt, but more importantly, as the principal of the school, your responsibility is to protect that school against those kinds of things. You have to protect the shield, as they say in the NFL. You have to protect the district. And the way you do that is having adequate supervision during the day on what's called a duty roster, and for after-school activities, what's called a supervision schedule, and they cannot be left to chance. Now, those things, excuse me, those 2 documents are not standalones. They're a function of your master schedule, because teachers that are in class obviously can't be on supervision. So when we look at what the law is. Legal requirements for planning instructional time. That factors into your, it's all, the master schedule and the duty roster and the supervision schedule are all tied together. Y'all see that on the screen now, legal requirements for planning instructional time? All right. According to General Assembly, Session 2005, full-time classroom teachers should be provided a duty-free instructional planning period and duty-free lunch period 5 days a week. That affects your supervision and duty roster schedule. You can't take teachers' planning time and put them on supervision. You can't do planning time after school. You can't count that as that after school time as planning time. And you can count 30 minutes of the end of the day as duty-free time, but not if you put them on a supervision schedule for after-school activities. Let me say that again. Let me be clear. You can't take teachers' planning time during the day and put them on a duty roster schedule. Their planning time has to be preserved. 5 hours a week, it says. That's the state law. Now, you can count the last 30 minutes of the day after kids have gone as duty-free time, not planning time. Planning time has to be during the instructional day. You can count that last 30 minutes. What principals do to get the 5 hours duty-free time so that teachers can supervise the cafeteria at lunchtime, what principals do is they count the first 30 minutes of the day before kids come and while kids are coming in and before teachers start teaching, and the last 30 minutes of the day, that makes an hour a day times 5 days a week. There's your 5 hours of duty-free time. But you can't put teachers on a supervision schedule during that time. Remember, supervision is outside the regular school day, and count that as duty-free. So you may have to find creative ways to have some teachers that you need to have teachers out on hall duty in the morning and in the afternoon, but that can't be counted as their duty-free time. So you have to find some other time during the day to give them duty-free time. See how all of it works together? How your master schedule, your duty roster, and your supervision schedule works together. And it's all based on state law. State law says 5 hours of planning time a week, 5 hours duty-free. Duty-free can't be while they're supervising kids on a supervision schedule before or after school. Planning time can't be taken to be on a duty roster during the day. So that's where you get caught up as a principal. That's where you get in trouble and teachers pitch a fit and go to the central office on you and file grievances and all those kind of things. NCAE, the in-serve person, comes in and gets on you. You got to be really careful to make sure that you're creative in the way that you do those things so that all your classes are covered, but everybody gets their planning time, everybody gets their duty-free time, and you have an adequate supervision during the day on your duty roster, and you have adequate supervision before and after the regular instructional day on your supervision schedule. Does that make sense to you? Do you kind of see how all those work together?
Mm-hmm.
If the principal needs for teachers emergency, then the law is overlooked. However, principals shall not unfairly burden the teacher's instructional planning on an ongoing basis. Now, the reason I brought up, I wasn't trying to be ugly about Sean and Enlow. The reason I brought that up was to make this so that it demonstrates this point right here. And that's why I used that exemplar a few minutes ago. On that snow day, on that day that it started snowing and everybody went crazy, you could tell all the teachers to go to the parking lot that day because that's an emergency situation. But emergency's not every day or once a week. An emergency is a true emergency, like it was snowing and they were releasing buses and it was going crazy there. Then you can get on the PA and say, everybody report to the bus lot and go on supervision schedule. Go to your duty stations. You can do that because that's an emergency situation. Even if that was if that was their duty-free time or if it was their planning time, doesn't matter because that's an emergency situation. But you can't do that on a regular basis. And the law has even got that written in there. You can't do this. You can't claim that it's an emergency every day. It has to be a true one-off emergency to do that. It can't be an ongoing thing. Your master schedule has to reflect 185 days or 1,025 hours over 9 calendar months. We are at a 185 schedule, and so what we're doing now, most schools, if they're still running the old 180 calendar, they've added 5 or 10 minutes a day for the 180 days to get that extra 5 days or that 1,025 hours. That factors into duty-free time. It also factors into planning time, and which affects, of course, your duty roster and your supervision schedule. If you're doing 10 minutes extra every day, but you're having teachers only stay 30 minutes after school, that means that they only have 20 minutes of duty-free time at the end of the day rather than 30 minutes. And if they got 30 in the morning and 20 in the evening, they only got 50 minutes, they're going to end up being 50 minutes short on duty-free time for the week. Again, one of those things you got to figure out. You got to figure out 10 minutes somewhere else during the day for them. And you can't just say, well, they won't say anything about that. Yes, they will. Somebody will. Let me reiterate that one again. If your school district is still on the 180-day calendar and is doing 5 or 10 minute extension, I think it's 10 minutes extension of the day, the daily schedule, in order to make up for those 5 extra days that's required to be done, and they're allowed to do that. They can't go less than 180. Some districts did go less than 180. Wilkes County went 160 a couple of years back or 3 years back, but now they're not. That was they got a waiver. They're not allowed to do that anymore. They can't go less than 180 now. We're out of the financial crisis. They claim financial crisis and need to close, so they went an hour extra every day and just did 160 days. You can't do that now. You still have to do at least 180 days. But you can do you can do 185. But if you do 180 and you add 10 minutes to the schedule, that does affect teachers' state mandated 5-hour-a-week duty-free time. And so you have to factor another 50 minutes in somewhere during the week if you're doing 10 extra minutes of instruction, and they only have 20 minutes of duty-free at the end of the day before they go off the clock. Local boards and school principals can determine how to use the extra 5 days. Basically what they do is 10 minutes extra a day. Your annual leave, vacation days, everybody gets 10. If you're on a 185 calendar versus a 180 calendar, again, you have to factor that in. You have fewer work days on the 185 calendar because teachers still work the same number of days overall. I think it's 200 days that teachers work. So that affects annual leave and work days. Used to be you had 5 work days before school and 5 after. If you're on the 185 calendar, you have 2 before and 3 after, or 3 before and 2 after. Again, that affects those annual leave days. It affects your your supervision schedule and your duty roster. You have to know that. You have to have 10 teacher work days. So that means if you're on a 185, you only have 5 annual leave days. So what you can do, and the reason this sounds confusing, but the reason I'm going down this road, you can make up some of that duty-free time on those extra days that teachers are there in the building. You may not be able to give it to them every week, but what you may be able to do is to scare throughout the calendar. You may be able to make up some of that duty-free time that they're owed. You weren't able to give them because you had extended day. Those are things that you need to consult with your district personnel about, but you need to make sure that your master schedule, duty roster, and supervision schedule takes into account whatever your local school calendar is. If you're missing 10 minutes of duty free, then you got to figure out on work days how to give that time back. Okay, all that has to be done. Calendar must include a plan for makeup days, instructional hours missed. And that when you start having to do makeup days, that you get into duty free again. You got to be thinking about that. And this talks about work days and when the calendar can start. So maintain, duty roster and supervision schedule helps with statute 115C307, which says you have to maintain order and discipline. Supervision does that. Provide for general well-being of students. That's when we talk about adequate supervision. That's the law that catches us when we get those civil suits. That's what catches us right there is, we weren't providing for the general well-being of students if we didn't have adequate supervision. So that's the law right there that gets us. Ensure school facilities are safe for students and staff. That goes back to the inventory and that assessment every 2 weeks. That's why this is the legal reasons why you do the things that we're talking about tonight. It's not just this is best practice. This is law. This is why we do these things. All right. All right. If we look at the CAP, can y'all see is that on the screen now? CAP, evidence 5. Can y'all see that on the screen?
Yes.
Oh, very good. Thank you. All right. One of the areas that we have to survey is facilities and resources. That's part of the CAP, and that's where that factors in. Just as a reminder, I wanted to show you that. Here are the things that are on the CAP, on the TWC. These are the areas in the teacher working conditions on facilities and resources that, again, speak back to that assessment inventory that relates back to duty roster and master schedule and all those things. Teachers have sufficient access to appropriate instructional materials, technology, office equipment, support. The school environment is clean and well maintained, adequate space to work productively. Those things are measured on the teacher working conditions survey also, so obviously they're important. Law says we have to do those things. We have to conduct fire drills and do safety inspections, but also it's part of what teachers report back to the state on, and principals are evaluated heavily on the results of the teacher working conditions survey. That's why we have you work with it so often. Culture and climate, safety, environment of your school is one of the 6 evidence artifacts because it's important. And they ask them these questions on the TWC. So it's not just an esoteric exercise, an intellectual exercise. You actually have to do these things, and it's measured. You have to turn your fire drill reports in. The fire marshal comes out and checks for safety. The teachers are allowed to grade you on that on the teacher working conditions survey. If something bad goes on in your school, in terms of somebody getting hurt, you're subject to lawsuit, you'll be reviewed to make sure that you're doing all the things that you're supposed to be doing. You have to turn in your duty roster and supervision schedule along with your master schedule every year to make sure that they're congruent, that your master schedule allows time for teachers to be on their duty roster and supervision schedule. You have to factor in whether you have a 180 calendar or a 185 calendar. All those things have to kind of come together. That's a lot, but they have to come together in one. You have to put it together. And so for that reason, you folks won't have to, but the folks that started in the Mels program in the fall of 15, this fall, that are in 601 right now, they're having to learn to write a process plan as part E of the OMA that puts all this together. That it's a process, how to put all this stuff together. And they're having to do a process plan, kind of like an action plan, to make sure that their process takes all of these factors into consideration when they're creating their master schedule, duty roster, and supervision schedule, that it's all one process. I wrote that this past spring and got the university passed it. I think it's, it can't be disjointed. It has to be a seamless process that creates these 3 documents. They're not 3 separate documents. They're actually 3 sections of one document is the way that you have to look at it. Okay. We've already looked at the assessment inventory. Again, we go back to the role of the principal. You know, again, we've talked about budgets, we've talked about school improvement plan, we've talked about personnel, we've talked about those things. To the last thing is principals, the duties and responsibility of the principal to discipline students and assign duties to teachers with regard to discipline, general well-being, and medical. That again speaks to supervision. That's the law that says that you've got to supervise kids right there also. So these aren't optional things. When I hear students say, well, we don't do this or we don't do that, you may not do them, but when push comes to shove, and as I always say, it's fun and games till somebody gets their eye put out and then somebody gets hurt. And when there's a legal review of what has been going on at your school, the law is clear about what your responsibilities are, and nobody can give you permission to break the law or not follow the law. If you weren't doing the right things, then you're going to lose that civil case. All right. I want to move us, if I go now back to our weekly schedule, go back to course content, course materials. I think I have covered everything that needed to be covered for this week. I'm trying to get a week ahead to give you a week off around week 14. Where there won't be any new material. You just get an extra week to work on your evidence artifacts. That's kind of my goal. So I think I've covered everything for week 10. Let me double check and make sure. We've covered the OMA last week. We've covered legal requirements for planning and instructional time, the role of the principal, facilities, assessment, inventory, cap, final levels. So I want to go ahead and move. I think we're about halfway into tonight. I want to go ahead and move into facilities. And so under facilities plan, I have this PowerPoint for you, operational emergency maintenance, that again fits hand in hand. I'm not going to talk about this semester. I'm not going to talk about bonds or how to build facilities. That's when you get your EDS or your doctorate and you work and do your internship at the central office level. Those are things that you learn at that level. The principal deals with buildings as is your building. Principals don't get involved in bond referendums and letting bonds and those things. It's actually against the law to campaign for those things. So you don't get involved in that stuff, and you don't get involved in the master planning. Mostly facilities for you is operating your own facility and maintaining it and making sure that you have emergency plans in place. So that, and again, that goes hand in hand with your master schedule, your duty roster, and supervision schedule. So that's the facilities that we're going to study. If you want to get more into financing of buildings, bonds, construction, those kinds of things, you can do that on your own. We've got some stuff like that on our Wiki Spaces page. Again, I can put that link on next week. In next week's lesson, I'll put that link under that to the Wiki Spaces page. I could actually do that. Facilities plan. Let me go back. I'll do that while I'm thinking of it right now. Go back to course content, course materials, and under facilities, I've got some really good facility stuff on our Wiki Spaces page. So for next week, facilities, I've got here are those, and I'm also going to do a web link, and this is our 603 Wiki Space page. Just go to the left menu, 603 Wiki page. And that URL is www.soegraduatecoursec.com. URSES courses dot wiki .com. That will take you to even more information. All right. Okay, so we're going to probably skip over, or we'll just cover very briefly next week, facilities. I'll try to get as much as I can of it done tonight. And then hopefully by the time we get to 14, we'll have gained a week. So let me get back to that. Facility plans, operational emergency maintenance, description of facilities, equipment, space necessary, better to plan and prevent accidents than to have to pay for liabilities. Construction management, generally you won't have to do that. Smaller districts you may have to, and you'll have to. I did when I was in Burke County. I didn't have to deal with construction in Mecklenburg County. We had a facilities department that had construction people that did that for us. We had a property manager that dealt with all of our construction. I went through a major renovation at the high school when I was principal there, but I had a facilities manager. Alvin did that. When I was in Burke County, we went through a major facilities renovation, but I did not have a facilities manager there, and I had to deal with the architect, the clerk of the works, and the construction manager. They're difficult to deal with. Hopefully, you'll be in a district where you won't have to do that, but that again is according to the size of your district. Preparing ed specs. Users, the facility specialists, and area architects and engineers. Generally, you won't be involved in that. That'll be done, again, they'll teach you about that when you get your EDS or your doctorate. You will need to be, these are the things that you are responsible for. Cleaning, whether you hire and fire your own custodians as I did in Burke County, or whether that was done through a division of the school district in Charlotte, Mecklenburg. Again, big or small, that's what determines that. In Charlotte, I didn't hire and fire the custodians, and we had a custodial supervisor that made sure the building was clean. In Burke County, I had to hire and fire the custodians, and I had to make sure the building was clean. Again, size of district. But you're responsible for cleaning, routine maintenance, safety checks. That's where that assessment inventory comes from. Health procedures, mechanical equipment, heating system manuals, all those kinds of things. All of that is covered in that assessment inventory checklist that's on tonight's course materials list. We've already covered the crisis box procedure and the crisis procedures. You're responsible for those procedures. You're off campus, and you got to have a short term where you go for fire drill, a little bit longer that you walk to, like maybe the church next door or the school next door, and then one where you're bused to. So that's where the off-campus site, lockdown procedures, reporting, communications, assistance, central office, all that's got to be in your crisis box and part of your crisis plan. I put that crisis management plan, that link is back earlier in our course materials, and it tells you how to develop all of these things, but you're responsible for all of that. We've already been through that. Your custodian, your head custodian, is in charge of operating instructions, emergency for your equipment. Generally, your maintenance department does all that stuff. Again, it's according to the size of your district. Big district, you have your maintenance people do that. Small district, you and your head custodian have to be responsible for that. Your major concerns for your facilities are academic. Are they adequate for the needs? Your master schedule. Do you have the PE teacher, using the cafeteria? Do you have math classes in the science lab or in science classes, in the auditorium? Making sure that you have your facilities planned correctly, that you have the right classes in the right place at the right time. Activities, again, after school activities are supervised properly and that they're using the proper part of the school and the rest of the building is secured. A lot of more modern schools have gates that can be put down to control traffic throughout the building, so that when you have you have an event in your school and it's in the gym or the cafeteria, that you can keep people from getting into the rest of the building. Athletics, your fields are maintained. You don't have holes or uncovered areas that people can step in or get hurt, or things around your field. Coaches are forever dragging old equipment and stuff around fields that are dangerous and rusty and sharp. But you keep all that stuff cleaned up. Sports services, adult education. If you're doing night classes or something on your campus, like at Athens Drive has these classes, and for those of you in Wake County, they've got their facility. They've got a facilities manager that does that. If it's being used, and the way they do it is they can't keep. If you go to Athens Drive, you've got to run the building. They don't have any way to pin any of it off from any of the rest of it. So you just have to make sure all the doors are locked. Community and civic use. Now that's one of those things that you usually have a community use of schools department in your central office that does all that contract work to keep the liability away from you as a school. You can't, as a principal, say, yeah, come on over and play ball, or come on over and have church at our place. You can't do that. One of my very good friends that I was principal with, he was a little younger than me. We'd actually played golf earlier in the week. It was the summertime. And we played golf after school, played 9 holes. And later in the week, I think it was on Saturday. I think we played like on a Wednesday afternoon, and on a Saturday, he was allowing a little adult flag football league to use his ball field. They hadn't gone through community use of schools, and he was actually part of the league. He dove for a pass. As I said, he was a little younger than me. He was about 35 at the time. I think I was about 45 at the time, a few years back, several years back. He dove for a pass and broke his neck. Instantly quadriplegic. Instantly. No reversal. Broke his neck. Lucky to live. Paralyzed from the chin down. It did not go well in terms of insurance and liability and those things, because they had not gone through community use, and they were basically trespassing on school property without a contract. It wasn't work related. He wasn't there for work. And it became a real financial issue for him and his family, not only the disaster, the total tragedy of him breaking his neck, but all the accompanying things that went with that. The school district wanted to do some things, but just really couldn't. They just didn't have the liability there if they had looked after him and not other people who had maybe trespassed and got hurt on the school campus. It became a really sad situation. But the thing to remember there is although you're in charge of the facility, that community and civic use, there's a department in the central office that handles that, and everybody's got to go through that. It's for their own protection and your protection as well, in case somebody gets hurt using your facilities. I know a lot of churches are now trying to use schools on Sunday. I don't have a problem with that, but you got to go through, you got to put those people through the process to make sure that they've done that. Planning keys, priorities, time periods, maintenance, and renovation. That gets back to what I was talking about before, a process plan. When you're putting together all of your master schedule, your duty roster, your supervision schedule, and you're tying that to your maintenance and supervision of your facilities, because they can't be separated, you have to make a master. There has to be a planning process that where you look at what's important. Academics has to be first. You have to plan for the use of your school facility and based on academics first, athletics, your kids, and not for how the community wants to use your facility. You have to set your priorities. Has to be academics. These are more central office kind of things: projection of funds to build, projection of funds to operate, funds to maintain. This is kind of a central office issue. Principals usually aren't involved in that. The planning team have to be your school personnel and whatever technical assistance that you need when you're talking about how you set up your management plan, your process plan for the year. You know, technical assistance, specialists in educational planning. Usually you're an expert yourself, but you have to pull those people together when you're doing a plan. We won't go through site selection, those kinds of things. Bidding, all this stuff, as I said, most of this stuff is central office kind of things. I wanted to show you this to show you that the part of this that was important is it all has to be a plan. You have to know what your responsibility is, but you have to set a list of priorities on the use of your facilities. All right, so we can get out of that one. I think that's all of that. All right. Bear with me here. Blackboard's making me put my credentials back in as usual. All right, last thing I want to cover tonight is school size crucial to improvement? Smaller, safer, saner, successful schools. Is that PowerPoint on your screen now? Okay, Randy nodded her head. All right, gosh, that's small. Let me see if I can make that a little bit bigger. All right, smaller schools. All this meta-analysis of, which means they looked at all these studies about in relationship to school size. When studies were done, big schools versus small schools, and what they've decided, what all the research says, is that smaller schools are a safer place for students, or more positive, challenging environment. Students achieve higher, have higher graduation, fewer discipline problems, greater satisfaction for families, students, and teachers. All right, you say, but Dale, I'm the principal of this school. I have no control over what size this school is. That is true. But there are things that you can do in facilities management, in master scheduling, duty roster, supervision. When you put all this process together, how you manage your facility, you can make your facility smaller by dividing into smaller units. Now, you may have to do multiple master schedules to do that, what we call a mosaic. You can go back and read in our book about different types of schedules, but one of them that they'll mention is a mosaic schedule. And basically all a mosaic is it means that you are running different parts of your school are running different schedules because they are a separate unit. You can make even a large school be a smaller school environment by how you organize and manage your school and your master schedule. So that's what I wanted to conclude with tonight, is that notion of schools within schools, or having an 8th grade hall or a 9th grade building, or basically setting up in a pod concept of smaller units within your school. That all sounds well and good, but that only works if you plan for that in your process of how you develop your master schedule and facilities use. And they can't be separated. But you have to set that up. So you may have to do what's known as a mosaic schedule to do that, where 3rd grade's on a different schedule than 4th grade. And you turn the bells off, or the bells ring in different parts of the buildings at different times. One of the biggest problems with that is the guys that set your bells up don't want to do that. But that's easily, that's just a technology problem that can be easily conquered. And so not only is it difficult to come up with one schedule, it's even more difficult to come up with multiple schedules. But we know there is value to you as a principal to set up multiple schedules and divide your building into smaller pods. A safer place, more positive, challenging environment, higher achievement, higher graduation. So after I've gone through all this drama about how this process, about how you got to supervise your facilities and do assessments and master schedule, now I'm telling you, oh, by the way, it'd be better if you develop multiple of these and ran them all at the same time. But that's just the truth. That's the job. I know that probably doesn't make you happy to hear that. But that is just the truth. People say, why should we share with other organizations? Here's another finding. Schools that share facilities with other organizations can offer broader learning opportunities for students, higher quality service to students and their families, higher student achievement and better graduation rates, ways to stretch and make more efficient use of tax dollars. Basically what that one is a lot of times when you bring those groups in, you can charge them, number one, but they also have skills and abilities. They bring competencies within that you can tap into. So why would you share your facilities with others? For those reasons right there. So that's kind of the last two that I wanted to hit you with tonight was, it's all one big process that cannot be separated. Facilities, supervision, master schedule, duty roster, that's all one big process. You have to set your priorities. When you get that done, and when you get competent at doing that, then you can move into making a mosaic, which is multiple of those that you run at the same time. And then again, there is value again, and you have to factor in community use to that also. That adds a third layer. First layer is getting it all done. Second layer is making it mosaic with multiple parts to that layer. And the third layer is bringing community in and using your facilities. I'm not telling you can do that as a first-year principal. That's really tough. But that's the goal. That's the grail. That's the holy grail right there. Putting it all together in one process and making it all work seamlessly where everybody's needs met. The place is clean and safe. Teachers are getting their planning time. They're getting their duty-free time. Everything about your management routine is tight, and all laws are being met and everything is good. And then you expand that by making multiple or a mosaic schedule that divides your school into smaller pods or components. And get the small school effect, even if you're a big school. And then third, you add that last layer on where you're bringing community in to use your facilities and bringing their money and their expertise with them. That's when you've got it going. That's when you are a executive manager at that point. And that's what we're asking you to become, an executive leader that gets to the point where they are expert at all three levels that we've talked about tonight. The process, the mosaic, the multiple process, and then adding to get the benefit of small school size, and then bringing community and community use into an organizational use into your building. If you can do that, then you can become an efficient manager. And that's what this section of our lesson has been about, and the OMA is about organizational management. That's when we talk about organizational management, we're talking about these three levels: creating a process that's seamless for facilities, master schedule, duty roster, supervision, assessment checklist for safety, all of those things. Mosaic, making a big school into a small school, then involving community and organizational resources for community use of schools. That's when you hit that's when you're a master of executive leadership on the organization. And that's where you should be heading as a principal. You won't be there when you first start out. It'll take you some time, but that's the goal, is to get where you've achieved all three of those. I see my time is up. I will be on the air again tomorrow night. It's possible that I could be late tomorrow night. I'm traveling during traffic time tomorrow from campus. Hopefully I will be on the air, but don't panic. If I'm going to be late, I'll send an email. I won't be later than probably 7:30. I'll try to make our regular 7 o'clock time, but I'll be back on the air tomorrow night and we'll answer any questions from all this stuff that we've covered this week. I've enjoyed it as usual. I will talk to you tomorrow night.